Hello, my name is Leah. Today I am here with my fall reading wrap-up. My past two recent reads videos have just kind of been like whenever I've felt like deciding to make a video about it, but I think going forward I'm gonna start doing these seasonally. I think monthly is a bit too much, especially for a more writing focused channel, but I think that giving myself a deadline at least will also help motivate me to read more, because I'll be like, oh, I only have 2 videos to talk about for this wrap-up. I need to read another at least. Which clearly I need some extra motivation, because today I'm here to talk about 5 books that I have read since, I think the last one of these I made was in July. And technically one of them I didn't even read in the fall, I read in the summer, but I'm only just now able to speak about it. But we'll get to that one later. Let's jump right into the wrap-up though. The first book that I read since the last recent reads video is Beach Read by Emily Henry. I absolutely loved this book. I fell in love with the characters. I flew through it so fast. I feel like for a lot of this year I've been gravitating a lot towards romance, which isn't strange because of the genre. It's strange for me though, because I typically read fantasy. I have a theory about this though. I think that me simultaneously trying to read more while also working really hard on multiple fantasy projects is kind of why I've been doing this, because I find it very hard to read things that are similar in any way to stuff that I'm writing. It's been difficult for me to pick up fantasy this year, which sucks because I love fantasy, clearly enough to write it myself. But this was another one of the romance books that I picked up this year. Emily Henry is now one of my favorite authors. I'm very excited to read more by her. I know a lot of people really like People We Meet on Vacation, and then I think she's coming out with a new one soon called Book Lovers, so we're here for it. This one in particular intrigued me because it's about 2 writers. Specifically, the main character is a romance writer. Her father has recently passed away, and with that passing, she learns that he had this secret affair that she didn't know about, but that her mother did know about. And he's left the house that he had with this other woman to her. So she has to move to this house because she's running low on money because she hasn't been able to write a book since he passed. She's determined to write her next book here while also clearing it out and getting the place ready to sell. And she runs into an old college acquaintance. They weren't friends. He writes deep, serious literary fiction, and so there's some animosity between the 2 of them at first, kind of resenting each other for the stuff that they write. But in order to prove to the other person that their genre is serious and is hard work, they swap genres, and for the rest of the summer they do research together, and you know, it's a romance. We all know where that part's gonna go, or at least we assume we know where that part's gonna go. Overall, I really loved this book. I'm a big fan of the cover. It makes it look a lot more beachy than it actually is. There technically is a beach, but I'm pretty sure this is set in like Michigan or something like that, so it's a lake beach, and it's like cold and dreary a lot of the time. So that part I wasn't expecting. I was expecting a little bit more warm, summery vibes, especially because of this cover, but be aware of that. It is still a nice beach read though. The next book that I finished after Beach Read I do not have with me because I borrowed it from a library, and that is You Who, Why You Matter and How to Deal with It by Rachel Jankovic, ? Last name. This book is a nonfiction book all about identity, specifically within the frame of Christian identity. I really enjoyed this one because it sort of goes through deconstructing what we hold to be givens or like preconceived notions about identity, where that comes from, and then goes into what the Bible says about identity and how that is supposed to play out in our everyday lives. It talks a lot about existentialism, the idea of the best self, and how whether a lot of us realize it or not, the way that we view identity is very much a we create our own purpose type of thing. It's our actions that determine our identity, and how this is a very like external way to think about and view identity, because it's kind of like just putting bumper stickers on the back of your car like saying I am this, 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 and this, but those are just things surrounding you. They're not really you, if that makes sense. It also goes into how Christians have sort of adopted this from culture as well. A lot of the things like the activities we do in church, or just the fact that we go to church at all, has become one of those bumper stickers. It's a I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, and that's just another bullet point on the list of what our identity is. But that doesn't really say anything about us as an individual, our internal self, or what God says about our internal self either. One thing that I really like about the description is this particular line. It says, in Christianity, the self is always a tool and never a destination. And that sort of speaks to the way that this book talks about idolization of the self. You know, we're told from every angle to find yourself, follow your heart, and those things are true to an extent. Like, you obviously don't want to be faking who you are for the sake of fitting into a particular mold. We've idolized that to the point of that is the ultimate goal, is to do those things. There are things in me that are my personality that if I were true to, I would be a much worse person. Like, my stubbornness, that is an innate part of me. That is something I was born with, something that my parents have talked about me like demonstrating from a very young age. And that's because of the sin nature that we are born with. That's a part of us from the very beginning. And just because that's a part of us doesn't mean that we have to be true to those things. And it's the idolization of the heart as the ultimate guide that I think that this book is really talking about, and how to sort of reframe the way that we view our own selves, what is worth holding on to within ourselves and what is necessary to let go of. Which is why I really like that line as kind of a summary of the book. The self is a tool, it's not the destination. Our own happiness and desire and truth are not the ultimate ideal to strive for. I really enjoyed the book. If you are a Christian and would be interested in a book like that, I definitely recommend it. I found it very helpful, and it put into words stuff that I just didn't have the words for or didn't know how to express, and also taught me new things as well, and actual like strategies at the end, especially on how to rework your mental framework about what identity is. The next book I have to talk about today is technically one that I haven't finished, but I read the vast majority of it in the fall, and I honestly have no excuse for why I'm not done with this yet. But that is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. I'm absolutely loving this book. Obviously, it's Leigh Bardugo. We all knew it was gonna be great. I have about 100 pages left, I think, at the end. So I can't speak to, I guess, the story as a whole because I haven't read its wrapping up, but I'm entering that, like, end game section. This book is a part of the Grisha-verse. This is the third series. Is it a duology or a trilogy? I can't remember. I think it's a duology. Yes, it is in fact a duology. But this book follows Nikolai from the original trilogy, which was the only character I liked in those books and was the main reason why I was so excited for these to come out. Zoya is also a POV character, and Nina from Six of Crows. Why couldn't I think of the name of that? I'm loving it. There's not much I can say in terms of summary without spoiling both the original trilogy and Six of Crows, and I have a feeling that since the TV show is coming out, more people are going to be picking those up for the first time, so I don't want to let anything slip here. I've had this book for genuinely like 4 years now. I got it like my junior year. 3 years, basically. It's not that I've dreaded reading it or like not wanted to. I genuinely have wanted to read it that whole time. It's just never worked out in a weird way, or like my mood was slightly bringing me towards something else. I think just the fact that I knew this was always going to be here, like it's been sitting on my shelf for forever. Like, it's the first book, it's a new release. I knew the other book was gonna take a bit to come out, so there wasn't like an urgency to read it either. This fall, I basically was like, Leah, you just need to freaking read it. Like, you've been waiting for so long, the other book's already out, just read it. And I picked it up, and I'm very glad that I did because I'm having such a good time. I'm trying to think if there's anything I can say about it, but like, it really has to do with where the characters are at the end of both the Grisha trilogy and Six of Crows duology. I guess the main concept is the characters kind of dealing with the aftermath of that, trying to rebuild and stabilize the country, but there are some lingering threats also tied to the effects of the Grisha trilogy that are kind of threatening to destabilize that piece. And at the same time, trying to deal with some of the trauma of everything that happened to them in one way or another. Hence, Scars. Good title for that. That's like the most vague summary I've ever given, but that's kind of the gist of King of Scars. And then the last book I have to talk about today, I also don't have with me because I read it on audiobook from my library, is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Again, literally no clue why I haven't read this book yet. It's been out for so long, but when it came out, I also was just deep in my fantasy rabbit hole, so it just never even crossed my mind to pick up something that was not fantasy. And when I saw it available from my library, I was like, Leah, check out the book. You need to read this dang book. This was also the first audiobook I've ever read. I'm very late to the audiobook train because, I don't know, there's just something about a physical book, but I also have a lot of moments in my day where an audiobook would benefit me very much, like doing chores, driving. That's the main two. The Hate You Give is about a girl named Star. She is African American and lives in an inner city neighborhood, but goes to school in a private, predominantly white school out in the suburbs. And at the very beginning of the book, she is in the car with and has to witness one of her friends being murdered by a cop. So the book as a whole is kind of her, the neighborhood, the school, all dealing with what comes after that. She personally has to struggle with, does she testify? Does she give her statement? How far does she take this when really what she wants to do is heal? And the protests and riots that happen as an effect of this as well. This book hit like so hard after the year 2020. It definitely would have hit me hard before 2020 as well, but everything that happened really just brought it to life in a way that I don't think I would have experienced if I had read it before 2020. And maybe one reason I can be glad that I waited so long to read this, because it was real to me personally in a way that it might not have been before that. And there's a reason for that. Obviously, Star's life is not my reality, but that's what I love about books, though, is just the inherent empathy that you experience while reading them. Other like forms of media, like TV, movies, they can give you those same emotions, but you're engaging with that in a more passive way. You're consuming it. Whereas when you read a book, it's your own brain that has to piece together these images. It's your own brain that is being placed directly into the point of view of whoever the main character is, or whatever POVs are the ones that you're experiencing the story through. Different people learn in different ways, but I think that fiction is one of the best ways to learn about perspective. Like this book does to people what not a single infographic on Instagram did last summer, you know? Finishing it and thinking about it also brings up for me the discourse surrounding it about it being banned in schools and certain libraries under the excuse of the language or the sexual content, even though there was zero sexual content, period. There was the mention of it, but that's literally just what high school is. And again, the language. That's literally just what high school is. Like, that's not new to any high school student. That's not gonna corrupt them because they hear that every day in the hallways anyways. And I know a lot of different books are banned for different reasons, but a lot of the times it really just boils down to the message that it's banned for, not the actual content. Because there's plenty of books that have the same sort of content that are allowed. And beyond just The Hate You Give in particular, or the discussion of individual banned books, any culture or organization or group of people or whatever who start dictating what fiction can and can't be read is a very dangerous one, in my opinion, because of that inherent lesson on empathy. Like, I genuinely believe that besides actually engaging like person to person with people who are outside of your own experience, reading a fictional book about that experience is the best way to gain empathy for that experience and learn what that other perspective genuinely is like. And obviously fiction is not reality. The events of fiction can be based in reality, but it's never going to be reality because it's crafted to fit into a neat cover to cover binding. But it's the emotion, it's the theme, it's the lesson underneath it all that is the most real thing about fiction. And that, I think, is the most important thing that fiction can do, is to convey those abstract things, those abstract truths in a concrete way that is just super effective at actually teaching those things. Anyways, that went on a bit of a side tangent. The book on its own, I really did enjoy. I thought the story was just so engaging, and my deviation into these other topics isn't because like, oh, I read one book and now I think these things. No, these are things that I already held opinions on, and just reading this book in the context of knowing like how much it's been banned brings those to light, and I wanted to just like touch on that briefly. It's a much bigger conversation than a singular portion of a singular video could ever do, but it's also related to what that book does, which is why I thought it was fitting here. And then the last book I have to talk about is another one that I don't have to show you, and is technically one that I read in the summer, and that is Obarion by Justine Sparks. It might be Obarion, not entirely sure, but this book blew me away. This is a post-apocalyptic dystopian book, and y'all, I miss dystopia so much. It definitely doesn't have like 2013 dystopia vibes though, which I think is a good thing. We're done with that type of dystopia. We need to move into the new era of dystopia. But the reason I couldn't talk about it in my last recent reads video is because this was one of the books that I was working on at the time as a developmental editor, so I've read it multiple times in somewhat earlier drafts, but the story, y'all, phenomenal. And I'm so excited to be able to share it with you finally, because it's out. It's been out for a little while now. It is the first in a series, but I don't know if I am able to speak about how many books there are planned, so I'm just not going to touch that. But like I said, this is a post-apocalyptic dystopian book. It's set in a future California after war has sort of decimated the land, poisoned the water, poisoned a lot of the natural resources, and the population has plummeted significantly. So groups are very tribal now, and there's lots of infighting going on for the final bits of the natural resources that are available. There are two main groups that are the biggest players in this, the Obarion in the south and the Vedas in the north, and our main character Atlas is the son of the Obarion general. One day on a mission, he is captured by the Vedas and is held prisoner in their base, where he meets two renegades, which are a people group who are uninterested in the war. They stay neutral, they sort of keep to themselves. Both tribes have attempted to mobilize them to get them on their side, because mobilizing the renegades would definitely turn the tide in the war. But there's a lot about the Vedas and the renegades that don't line up with what he always believed to be true about them, and Atlas learns something about his own mother that poses a lot more questions than it does answers. That is about as much as I feel like I can say without spoiling anything. Trust me though, this book was so fun to read. Even that like initial draft that I got to like read through and work on, I was like blown away by the characters and the world and the story, and seeing where it was when Justine finished it, like, this is definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. So if you are in the mood for some really great fresh dystopia, you should definitely check out Obarion by Justine Sparks. My part is done and over, so I get no benefit from promoting it, but I will leave this one linked down below if you are interested. But those are all the books I have to talk about for my fall wrap up. The only benefit of having not very many books to talk about is that I get to kind of go a little bit more in depth in each one, whereas if I had more, I would just kind of be giving a quick little summary and saying what I liked about it. For my own sake in reading, I need to step it up. Let me know down below what you have been reading recently, if you've read any of these, how did you like them, or if you have any recommendations for me to check out. I would love to hear it from you. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye!